So, a very good evening, everyone who has joined us, and welcome to today's webinar. I am Kirtika from the Asian Adventures team. We are a 33-year-old company dedicated to conservation travel experiences across the globe. We are also the founding force behind the Global Wildlife Fair, which was created as a platform that brings together conservation, tourism, creativity, dialogue around wildlife and nature. Very recently, we also initiated the Indian Wildlife Network, as I had mentioned earlier, and it acts as a collaborative platform connecting conservationists, storytellers, and nature practitioners across the country. Now, let me quickly walk you through what you can expect from this webinar. Our speaker will take you on a journey across Gujarat's diverse wildlife landscapes, from wetlands and grasslands to forests and coastal ecosystems. We'll explore the state's rich bird life and some of its most remarkable biodiversity hotspots. The session will highlight how wildlife tourism supports conservation and contributes to sustainable development. Our speaker will also share how nature-based tourism can benefit local communities while creating meaningful wildlife experiences. And finally, we will discuss the importance of responsible tourism and how each of us can protect these incredible landscapes. Now, I would like to hand over the session to Sir to lead us into this very intriguing discussion. Over to you, Sir.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Pleasure to be here. So thank you for inviting me. There's some familiar names I see that are on this webinar, but there's quite a lot of people who won't know me. So my name is Mike. I'm currently sitting in the UK and should be at work at the moment, but never mind. But many of you will know me from my time in India. So I've been fortunate enough to spend 17 years altogether living in India, partly in Delhi, mostly in Bangalore, and traveling wildly and widely through that time. Before that, I actually have a background with birdwatching and with data. I used to work for the BTO briefly in the UK, working on their bird track system, which was like an eBird-like system, but before eBird existed. And I've always been very interested in wildlife and the data that comes from it. My time in India has been quite varied. Lots of fun stuff with the Delhi Bird Club in the early 2000s. Nice to see Martin on the call, who's another one dating back from that time. And lots of great exploring around in the Delhi area. Great fun in those days. We didn't have much information. You didn't have the internet. You didn't have eBird. Didn't have Google Maps. So a lot of time just spent exploring around the area. And I think the one wonderful thing about India is that you can do that. You can find new places. There may be well over 1 billion people there, but there are still plenty of fantastic wild areas. In more recent years from Bangalore, I started doing some work for Bird Count India, part of the Nature Conservation Foundation NGO. And I worked on promoting birdwatching across India and working on introducing eBird to India. And it is phenomenal how successful eBird has been and how many people are using it, how much data there is produced from it. And it's great to see. So I did that for a while. I sort of found myself back in the UK, and actually my day job is working for Natural England, who's the government advisor, the advisor to the UK government on the environment. And so I work on similar areas actually of making environmental data more accessible. What I'm going to do today, though, is take you on a little bit of a journey through Gujarat. So we'll explore some of the fantastic wildlife areas in Gujarat. Moving around the state, seeing some of the wildlife, seeing some of the birds, a few other things, maybe some food every now and then for that. So if we just, I shall just share my screen for you, except I can't at the moment because the share button's gone. There we are, it's just moved. Okay. So you should be seeing a fine old male lion. And we'll talk a little bit more about them as we come on, because obviously the pride, no pun intended, of Gujarat wildlife. But what we'll do today is we'll talk about where we're going. So we're going to Gujarat, as most of you know, especially those in India. A few might not have joined from abroad. We're going to the very west side of India, So we're in my West India is the green bit on my map, and we are in India's westernmost state. Interestingly, a nice sort of jagged coastline in Gujarat. So it's actually got the largest coastline of any state in India. We're bordering Pakistan to the west and north, and three different Indian states. That's Rajasthan to the north, Madhya Pradesh to the east, and Maharashtra to the south. There's a massive variety of habitats in Gujarat, which makes it so fantastic for wildlife. So we have the salt flats, the Rann of Kutch we'll be talking about. Lots of wetlands, both coastal wetlands as well as inland wetlands. So we have marine areas, we have freshwater areas, and then we have the more deserty areas. We have a lot of grassland, thankfully, still got a lot of grassland. Deciduous forest, teak forest at Gir, for example, and mangroves on the coast. So it's this rich variety that leads to such a great variety of wildlife. What do you know about Gujarat? Gujarati and Hindi, main languages, but you can get by in English quite well, which is good for me because I've don't know any Gujarati and I've forgotten most of the Hindi I used to know when I lived in Delhi. But for wildlife, what is Gujarat special for? Well, it's especially special for Asiatic lion, which is a subspecies of the lion we're familiar with from Africa, and also Asiatic wild ass. It's another subspecies. But both of those occur only in Gujarat now. But it's more than that. It's more also about spectacular bird watching. Talk about vast flocks of flamingos, a lot of birds in large numbers, cranes, flamingos, pelicans, larks. It's really spectacular stuff. So, what else do we know about Gujarat? It's got a rich history going back a long, long time, 5,000 years from the Indus Valley civilization or the Harappan civilization. So you can visit places such as Latal and Dolavira on the ancient trade routes, wander around the ruins there. Gujarat was Mahatma Gandhi's birthplace. That's on the coast at Porbandar. But the Sabarmati Ashram, which is shown here, was his headquarters for many years until he set off on the Salt March, where he vowed not to return to until India got its independence. It's a lively state full of festivals. This is a Navratri shown in the bottom left here. Navratri literally means 9 nights, and it's the Hindu festival in October-ish time, honoring the goddess Durga. It's a major festival in Gujarat in particular, last night being Dussehra, celebrated over much of India, and it's all about really celebrating the victory of good over evil, with various different local stories, depending on where you are in India. And Gujarat is really famous for craft, especially textiles. This is the Calico Museum, which has got one of the world's finest collections of carpets, rugs, and various other textiles up to sort of 500 years old. Those who know me would realize that I'm very interested in the food wherever I travel as well. So Gujarat has got an excellent selection of food. It's a vegetarian state, which might disappoint some of my friends from over in this country, but no, never fear, because there's lots of great food. What we got on this picture, we have, I suppose, one of the most famous things in Gujarat is the one in the top middle there, which is dokla, which is like a soft sort of sweet and sour snack made from chickpea flour. Tetlas, the bottom, which is a roti made of fenugreek, and various pakoras on here. So lots of good food. It's a dry state, meaning that there's no alcohol sold. Again, I can see a few of my friends from the UK turning their nose up here, but don't have to fear, you can get permits for foreign visitors through some hotels. Anyway, on to tonight's journey. Where we're going to go? Well, we're starting on the right side, the east side in Ahmedabad, and we're going to go on a route south through Gujarat. So visiting some of the wetlands nearby, down through Velavadar Grassland Reserve, and down to Gir, which is at the southern tip of this route. Then we go back up to the coast at Jamnagar and loop around the Gulf of Kutch into the Great Rann of Kutch on the sort of northwest end here. We then head across to the Little Rann of Kutch further east before we get back to Ahmedabad. And I'm pleased to say, although I haven't been in India for a year now, but my next trip will be doing something very similar to this in November. Start in Ahmedabad on the Sabarmati River. It's the 5th most populous city in India. Little known fact, well, little known to us foreigners anyway. I'm not sure most people in India probably do know, but it's not actually the state capital in Gujarat. Instead, that is Gandhinagar, the planned city on the edge of Ahmedabad. And it's quite industrial generally, as a big technological hub in Gujarat, very successful. But there's still a lot of culture and tradition. And so Ahmedabad is actually a UNESCO World Heritage Site for its culture. You can visit sites such as this is the Adalaj stepwell. Gujarat's very famous for its stepwells. It used to provide water and be a focal point for the village. This one is apparently it's 5 stories deep and about 500 or so years old, I think. But on to the wildlife. That's what we've come here for. So what do you see first of all? Quite similar to a lot of North India. So some of the common birds you'll see. These birds in India are generally sort of oriental birds, but in the winter we get a lot more from, especially in the north of India and to Gujarat, of Palearctic origin. That's from sort of Eastern Europe and across Asia. So that means in the winter, for example, we see lots of ducks, waders, raptors. Within the cities, those first sort of birds you see are the ones that are on this picture. So house crows, common miners, bank miner as well in Gujarat. Lots of rose-ringed parakeets, big flocks of thousands roosting in the cities. Black kite in many of the cities. Interesting that black kite is really a scavenger. It's abundant in the cities, but not in the country so much. This particular picture, black kite, is actually a black-eared kite. It's a subspecies that comes from Central Asia, sort of Kazakhstan, parts of Russia, and it winters in India. So there's lots of more black kites around in Gujarat in the winter. And interesting, only quite recently, they did some GPS tagging of kites, and they found that they cross the Himalayas. So they're migrating near K2, in fact, in the Karakoram range, flying at heights of sort of 3,500 meters. They were even recorded up to 6,500 meters. And they also vary the route a bit. So I think they take advantage of the winds through the Himalayas. So it's quite a fascinating migration south to India. Laughing dove is one of those birds that's not necessarily common in all parts of India, but in Gujarat it is quite common. It likes the drier country. So lots of familiar birds. And when you travel around the countryside, bird life is very obvious. Around the villages, white-throated kingfishers, the drongos, spotted owlets even, house sparrows. Around the village ponds, you'll find black-winged stilts, pied kingfisher, white-browed wagtails. So lots of these are the sort of common everyday birds you see whilst travelling. But to start with, on our journey, we're actually going to start with a couple of wetlands. Very close to Ahmedabad, Thol wetland, it's right on the edge of the city, and then Nalsarovar is a bit further away. Thol is an artificial lake, lots of marshes around, attracts a lot of birds, very easy to visit. And Nalsarovar is, again, it's a lot of marshes, which are really great for the birds. It's the largest wetland sanctuary in Gujarat, especially in the winter. Lots of migrants here. And here, as well as parts of other Gujarat, we're looking for large numbers of greater and lesser flamingos, pelicans, great white in large numbers, Dalmatians, a bit rarer, but still important. Cranes in large numbers, common and demoiselle, and lots of waders and waterfowl. So these are some of the birds that the wetlands are particularly important for. So Gujarat is on a fairly major migratory flyway, and we also get a lot of birds that just pass through, passage migrants. So these are important wetlands. Unfortunately, wetlands suffer everywhere through encroachment, development, pollution, sometimes poaching as well. But these are two of the finest wetlands that we'd visit on our trip today. And it looks quite wonderful. Obviously, a good way to explore somewhere like Nalsarovar is to take a boat out. So you can take a boat out. It's nice and stable. I see the lady at the front has got a camera on the tripod nicely. And it's a great way to get close to the birds here. So both Thol and Nalsarovar have about 300 species seen there. Nalsarovar is probably the widest variety of species of any site in Gujarat. And interestingly, it's popular for Indian birders because it's turned up a lot of very rare birds in India. So things like, in recent years, red-breasted goose, Namakwa dove, Sabine gull have all turned up at Nalsarovar. Great white pelican, Large flocks of this huge bird. Dalmatian, I mentioned earlier. Dalmatian comes in winter, is rarer almost everywhere, but Gujarat is a great place to see it. And the flamingos. So greater flamingo in huge numbers. Both greater and lesser flamingo breed in Gujarat, but quite rare for them to breed anywhere else in India. So Gujarat is a bit special for flamingos. They do tend to wander around the country quite a bit, but we'll see vast flocks in a few places in India, in Gujarat. And cranes. So Sarus crane is the resident crane. Everyone knows the Sarus crane, a very popular bird in India. It's actually the tallest flying bird in the world. They've been recorded, I think, well, probably, I mean, typically around about 5 foot tall, but some of them will be taller than me. I think they've reached even 6 foot. So really impressive. India has about half the world population of Sarus cranes. They've been hunted out from Pakistan. They've declined drastically in Nepal, Myanmar, Southeast Asia. There's some in North Australia still, but India is really important for Sarus. And the name, in fact, is of Indian origin, it's Sanskrit origin, meaning lake or water. So in India, they're particularly revered as symbols of marriage and fidelity because they pair for life. Actually, in Gujarat, it's a custom to take a newlywed couple out to see a pair of Sarus cranes, which is a great idea. I think we should always all do bird watching on our honeymoons. So the Sarus cranes are found in the wetlands. So the big threat to them, as with many other birds there, is habitat destruction. They're also hunted a little bit by migrant labor, typically in the past. But they'll use paddy fields a lot. So they come very close to humans, very used to human habitation. So Sarus cranes you don't see in large flocks. You usually see ones or twos, sometimes family parties. A few times you'll see them maybe into double figures, especially after the monsoon. But demoiselle cranes you will see in large numbers in the winter. So a large part of the population, the world population of demoiselle cranes and common cranes winter in northwest India. So it's a vital area for them, especially for demoiselles, which are not so widespread globally. Common cranes winter also across Europe. So somewhere like Spain, for example, gets very large numbers into hundreds of thousands. But demoiselles are certainly much more restricted. One speciality of Nalsarovar is the pratincoles, particularly collared pratincoles, which is a quite a rare bird in India, but often overlooked. They're quite difficult to identify, and this picture is quite a challenge. Both collared and oriental are in this photograph, but I wouldn't like to tell you how many of each there are. The most obvious feature on some, where they have a very prominent white trailing edge on the wing on the secondaries. So those are probably collared pratincoles, but oriental shows a little bit of white there, so they are quite tricky. And the best features to identify them have sort of only been recently discovered. So if using an old field guide, it tends to oversimplify it a bit. But interesting birds. So collared normally winters in Africa, and oriental breeds in India, with a few stay in the winter, but it's mostly a breeding migrant. There was a study or a GPS study done on oriental pratincoles, where a few were tagged on their wintering grounds in Australia. And one of those birds was tracked via GPS to Karnataka, where it stayed to breed. And if actually one of the birders from Karnataka actually went out to try and find where this bird was from the GPS thing and found it nesting in northern Karnataka. So it's a really unusual migrant, that winter Australia breed in India. And what else do we have? Some of the dry areas. So some of the birds you see in arid areas, the yellow-crowned woodpecker, which is a big fan of acacia forest, the thorn forest, and Indian golden oriole, which everyone knows it's quite a common bird in parks and gardens. One of the other lovely small birds with a very simple but pleasant song is the spot-breasted fantail, sometimes a white-spotted fantail. This is the one you find in Gujarat. It's a fairly well-named bird, as you can see from this image. So continuing down south, sort of southeast a little bit from this journey, we get to Velavadar, which is actually the national park is called the Black Buck National Park. Surprisingly enough, created to conserve the black buck, which is occurs in these like vast herds in the grasslands. It's very much a grassland-loving antelope. It's supposedly the world's fastest antelope, actually, but it has these wonderful spiral horns. So Velavadar itself and the Black Buck National Park is quite a small area, but it's really vital. It's grasslands which are really suffering from habitat destruction as they're turned over to agriculture or further development. But it's a real unique ecosystem and extremely important to conserve. The park has Indian grey wolf and golden jackal. They're the main predators, and they've got a lot of antelopes to feed on. But it's also really well known for harriers, big harrier roost in the winter, and lots of larks. It's just the perfect habitat for them. So you can take a jeep out to go and have a look at the black buck. And there they are. So they do jump, they do leap quite high. And look at those horns, really impressive. There's one of the predators we have, golden jackal. It is a hunter, but it's also a scavenger. They're quite common, not just in Velavadar, you find them in various other places, including outside protected areas. Often hear them howling at dusk. But it's worth looking carefully when you're in Velavadar in particular at your jackals to see if you can find one that looks longer-legged, longer, thin legs. If you see it closely, the white eyes. This is Indian grey wolf, now declining a lot in India. It's a subspecies of the grey wolf, which is quite widespread, and it's from the plains, from the arid areas. So you see it's quite a thin animal. It doesn't have much of a coat. It's not like you sort of traditionally think of wolves, which is no surprise. It lives in these hot areas, doesn't need the coat in the winter. It's the same species as you find in Tibet, the Tibetan wolf, but that obviously is a different subspecies adapted to the cold weather. So wolves hunt in packs, and obviously black buck is a prime prey. So chinkara, the gazelle you can find here, but they also take quite small mammals as well. And another good mammal to look for here, striped hyena. This is the only hyena in India. It actually does occur across North Africa. Although if you ever watch your wildlife films from Africa, it's always the spotted hyena you see, which occurs further south in Africa. They're odd animals. People think of them as dogs. They're actually more closely related to cats than dogs. And Rajasthan and Gujarat, probably the best places in India to see striped hyena. It's where I saw my first one when I visited Velavadar several years ago. And then the birds. So I think the most impressive thing at Velavadar is the harriers. So it used to have a very large roost in the winter of harriers. The harriers typically hunt in grasslands, in fields, in agricultural areas, and during the day they'll spread quite long distances to go out and hunt and feed. And then they tend to come back to communal roost sites. Velavadar is one of those. There's not nearly as many as there used to be. I don't know how many we get now. I'll look forward to finding out in November. But when I went about 20 years ago, I must have seen, I think, about 1,500 harriers all in the roost together. And it's an incredible sight on like a still evening as you just watch these birds slowly coming in, quietly coming in and just dropping into the grass to roost. This is the pallid harrier, a very pale grey, stunning male. And you also have large numbers of Montagu's harrier. The darker bird, you can't quite see, you can just about make it out here as a black band across the secondaries. So that's in the wing, but they're slightly covered up by other wing feathers here. But fairly similar to pallid harriers. Both are in very large numbers here. And that's the female of the Montagu's harrier. Female Montagues and pallid are very similar, quite difficult to tell apart. This one is actually the head pattern is much more typical of Montagues, so very, not so much white on it, doesn't have much of a pale collar, but intriguingly, one of the features of pallid is that it has wings that are shorter than the tail, so they don't stretch far. So the wings actually look more like a pallid harrier here. It is a Montagues on most features, but they are tricky. And there's the common cranes I mentioned earlier. So that's the 3 species of cranes that we have in Gujarat. Another nice grassland bird, painted francolin. This is a tricky one to see. Now is the time to go and see them, actually, in the monsoon. And you'll see and hear them especially, but they do just seem to disappear the rest of the year. Where they go, I don't know. They're just secretive. They don't call very much. So there are very few records anywhere in India outside of monsoon time. And some of the smaller birds, one I really like actually is the rufous-tailed lark. They usually let you get quite close to them. They have a real pleasant little call, and they're, for a brown bird, they're quite stunning when you see them nicely. Very much a lark of dry country. Also, dry country favourite is the white-eared bulbul. This, a few years ago, especially those of you who still got and use Salim Ali's books, will find white-cheeked bulbul in that. White-eared bulbul was split when people realized that the Himalayan white-cheeked bulbul and the plains or the deserty area white-eared bulbul are actually different species. So if you're in the Himalayas, maybe around Pangot, maybe in the new Birdsong Bungalow, you might well find the Himalayan bulbul, which has a nice sort of forward-pointing crest on it. But in the dry areas around Gujarat and other areas of the northwest, it's white-eared bulbul. It's relatively common there. And tricky ID time again. So this is a Sykes's warbler. It's mostly a passage migrant through northwest India. There's some of them winter more south in India. Sykes's warbler and booted warbler, I think, is possibly one of the most difficult identification problems that there is with birds in India. They are very, very similar. The calls are quite similar, behavior is quite similar. And I wouldn't actually, it's not my photo, and I'm not entirely confident. I think this is a Sykes's warbler, but from individual photos, they're very difficult. There's one of the birds that's nice to watch it feeding for a little while, and over a few seconds, you get a better impression of the structure and how it feeds, and there's subtle differences. But both Sykes's and booted are passage migrants and winter visitors to a certain extent in Gujarat. And one of the nice deserty area birds, rufous-fronted prinia. Lovely sort of chestnutty rufous on the crown. This is again likes a very arid country. So for Lavadar, you can stay right by the sanctuary, which is lovely, and you can listen to the jackals and things at night. But if you fancy a little more luxury, you can go and stay in the Neelambag Palace. This is one of the many heritage hotels now converted to a hotel. Interestingly, you can see if you look under the cover there, the old car, this vintage car here. So elsewhere in Gujarat, the Maharaja of Gondal has this incredible collection of vintage and classic cars. I think you must have a sort of 40 or 50 very old cars dating back over 100 years, the early 1900s, some of them, and you can go and visit those, which is quite a fascinating piece of history. And we can also find some good food around. So this is a good street food, mirchi bhaji, which for those who don't know the language is what it looks like. It's a green chili that's deep fried. Very nice, quite spicy, not too bad. I eat them wherever I go and do enjoy them. So continue a bit further south. So going down as far south as we're going in Gujarat this time to Gir National Park. And probably the most famous wildlife reserve in Gujarat because of the Asiatic lion. So it is the last place in the world where you can find the Asiatic lion. It's a subspecies of the lion here we know more from Africa. So the park itself is deciduous forest, lots of teak, lots of scrub, lots of rivers and streams across the area. So it's a beautiful habitat. It has lion, as we said, leopard, hyena again, nilgai, blue bull, large antelope, and some of the more obvious deer that you see in lots of places, spotted deer and sambar, which obviously are required for the lions to keep being well fed. It's great for birding. So a lot of variety of woodland birds and slightly more sort of scrub habitat birds. Mottled wood owl is one particularly, it's a particularly good site for it. But we'll find short-toed snake eagles and this sort of open country, and a lot of variety. You can see what a beautiful landscape Gir is. And the best place to stay in Gir would be the Gir Birding Lodge. Great for local birding, nice birds on campus, and to go and do safaris into the main national park. Interesting enough, I think this Gir Birding Lodge must have opened about 20 years ago or more. I was its very first guest, I think, when it hadn't actually quite opened. So I don't know how Moit managed to squeeze me in, but somehow I managed it about a week before it opened. It wasn't quite ready. So
We
looking forward to
we
visiting
yeah, we put you in one of the staff tents that was there for the labor.
it. No, yes, that's
What
right.
the
So
construction labor.
I'm going to come again in November. Do I get the same tent then,
Yes,
Moit?
yes, yeah. No, you won't get the same tent, but you'll get a very comfortable room. So,
Thanks. And of course, what we're here for in Gear, we're here for the Asiatic lions. So the Asiatic lion, the subspecies, used to be in Northwest Africa. It used to go basically across in a line eastwards from there through the Middle East, through Western India, going to East India, certainly through to Bihar, maybe even getting close to Calcutta. But hunting decimated them. And by about the turn of the century, about the year 2000, it was only present in Gir. So just in one national park in one state in India from that wide range. It's very similar to the African lion. The mane is a bit smaller, less bushy. It has, you can't see it very well here, but it has a skin fold along the belly. You could just about see a sort of flap of skin there, but otherwise quite similar to the African lion. There were, I think, probably population went down to just about 400 animals at one point. It's recovering quite well now. I think the last I heard was maybe somewhere around the 900 number, which is quite a lot for a relatively small area. It's one population, it's one confined, restricted geographically, so it is quite a risk. If there was a fire breakout, for example, an epidemic, it is majorly a threat, so it's highly endangered. There's been talks for many years about reintroducing some to other parts of India. There was a national park in Madhya Pradesh earmarked for reintroduction, going back probably 15, 20 years ago. It never happened for various reasons. Well, I can get a bit political here, I think, but partly Gujarat won't like to lose its uniqueness of having the Asiatic lion as an attraction. Maybe the fact that the chief minister at the time is now the prime minister of India might have make it unlikely to happen in the near future as well. And interestingly, the park that was earmarked in Madhya Pradesh is where they've reintroduced cheetah. So I don't think reintroducing any lions as well is going to be a good idea there. So it's always going to be at risk, is the Asiatic lion. But thankfully, you have a good chance of seeing them in Gir with the population there being quite strong at the moment. What's also a bit unfortunate, I suppose, because there are quite a lot of them in small areas, that about a third of them occur outside the protected areas. So they're coming into conflict with humans quite regularly. It also means they'll take cattle as prey, not just wild deer. So it can be quite a problem. But also in Gir, it's quite a good place for seeing leopard. Much more difficult to see than lions, and elsewhere in India, more difficult to see than tigers as well. But there are more of them. There's probably, I think they think there's probably about 3 or 4 times as many leopards as tigers in India. But they're solitary, they're quite secretive, they're mostly nocturnal, and they're quite camouflaged as well. So they tend to be much more difficult to see than both tigers and lions here. They like eating various monkeys, grey langur in particular. They'll eat peacocks, spotted deer, and sometimes even climb up the tree, pulling their deer up there with them. Again, come into conflict with humans quite a lot because they're quite widespread. They're often in urban or semi-urban areas. But there's another cat you could potentially see at Gir, and this would be the one I would love to see. It's not a big cat. We think of all the big cats that people want to see. It's a small cat. In fact, it's one of the smallest wild cats in the world. Certainly is in Asia. It's the rusty spotted cat. It's very rarely seen, primarily because it's exclusively, or nearly exclusively nocturnal. So you're unlikely to see this when you do a safari through the park in the daytime. It's endemic to India and Sri Lanka, doesn't occur anywhere else. And it's a really pretty cat. If you see it, especially when it's head on, these black stripes on the head are really quite striking. And you see on this one the sort of rusty chestnutty spots all across the side. So really stunning little cat. So Gujarat is quite good. It's probably the prime state in India for vultures. Certainly the Indian vulture, which this one is, and white rump vultures, which are the ones that have suffered drastically with the decline of vultures over the last 30, 40 years or so, I suppose. That's worth another webinar on its own sometime, but just for those who don't know, I think it was probably in about the 1980s that the decline was sort of starting to be noticed, but within 20 years, so within going up to the early 2000s, white-rumped vulture in particular, the population was estimated to have declined by 99.9% in less than 20 years. It's like almost unheard of for anything to die out that fast. Indian and slenderbilled were very, very similar in their declines as well. All primarily because of diclofenac, the drug that was given to cattle. New drug wasn't around before this. Thankfully, there's a lot of great work done, especially by the SAVE consortium, saving Asia's vultures from extinction, through the RSPB in India and through BNHS and various other organizations in the on the subcontinent and wider. So the populations are probably stable now, but they're stable at such a drastic low from what they used to be that they're never really going to recover that much, unfortunately. But they are critically endangered, so at least we can hopefully hang on to them. But a reasonable chance of seeing Indian vulture and white-rumped vulture either in gear like this, or even on when you're driving through remoter areas in the countryside. A lot of the population estimates done for vultures are done by long road surveys, where people drive along long stretches of road, especially in Gujarat and Rajasthan, counting all the vultures. Mottled wood owl was a speciality of Gir. Really smartly plumaged, medium-sized owl. They're mostly active at dusk, but you can occasionally see them in the middle of the day. That's one lovely thing about India, actually. We've quite a variety of owls we have, and a lot of them do get seen in the day at roosts, or some of them are active in the day. Obviously, everyone knows they're spotted owlets, which are common and very active in the day. So you do have a good chance of seeing quite a few owls on any trip in India, and certainly in Gujarat. And nightjars too, to some extent. This Indian nightjar. Again, if you're lucky, you can find one roosting. Otherwise, they're reasonably common when it does turn to dusk. And another nocturnal bird, well, not nocturnal, sandgrouse. Sandgrouse are known for coming to water in the mornings and evenings. Different species tend to come at different sort of times. Painted sandgrouse is one that comes to feed at pools in rocky, sort of deserty areas a little bit, but it comes quite late to the water in the evening, so even after dark. So it's quite difficult to see them well there, but with a bit of luck, you can find where they're feeding or resting during the day. Chestnut-bellied sandgrouse is the commoner sandgrouse you see around in India, and also comes to water in the mornings when it's actually properly light, so not even very early morning. And a rather beautiful common bird in these areas. I don't tend to appreciate how beautiful some of the common birds are. This is Tickle's blue flycatcher. And a small bird that is fairly common in these dry foresty areas is tawny-bellied babbler. There's two different subspecies in India, one with the white throat, like this one, and one without the white throat. So this is the one that occurs in South and Peninsular India. It's the one that doesn't have the white throat that goes in further north. And again, a sort of dry country, acacia, scrub areas, woodland areas near that. The white-naped woodpecker. It's endemic, not to India, does occur in some of the nearby countries, Pakistan, for example, but it's a subcontinent endemic. Just see a bit of the white nape on here, but very smart woodpecker. So Gir is known for some sort of community groups. This is the Maldari community. This is a pastoral group, both Hindu and Muslim, that are from Gir and tend livestock here. A lot of them lived inside the sanctuary, and when the sanctuary was set up, they've been resettled outside, which has led to a lot of habitat recovery inside the actual sanctuary. You're never far from colour in Gujarat. In colours and dress in particular, extremely bright in these desert areas. And there's another different community in this area, the Siddhis, who are of African origin, thought to have probably been slaves years ago when they first came over from Africa. And you've got small communities of them in various parts, especially around Gir again. And they're quite popular. They do dance performances that you can watch if you're staying nearby. And since we're right down south, Gir's a little bit inland, but you're not too far from the coast. So the Somnath Temple is a really impressive temple right on the coast, an impressive location in Gujarat. It's about 1,000 years old, except it's not, because it's been destroyed and rebuilt so many times over that period. I'm not sure how old the current structure is, but worth a visit if you want to go down and see the coast. And some more good food. So you'll find a very regular meal is the thali. So there's a fine-looking Gujarati thali. And you'll also find some not such good food. This is on my last trip to Gujarat. For those who aren't from India and don't know so well, dosa or masala dosa is a South Indian breakfast, and it's the best breakfast you could possibly have. It's one of the things I miss most about not living in India anymore. So I found dosa on the menu somewhere when I was traveling in Gujarat years ago, and they even had this thing called a special dosa. So I thought, oh, I'll try that one. That sounds great. And they sprinkle it with cashews and raisins and things, and it really is not great. So if you find a special dosa in Gujarat, please avoid that. Trust me on that one. Anyway, time to come back up north. So on the coast, we're going to Jamnagar. So Jamnagar it's a marine area, but also has some fresh water. Lots of resident birds, loads of migratory birds, especially in the winter. So the Kijaria Bird Sanctuary is one super area in here, and some key species. It's actually, for waders generally, it's one of the best places in India, but one particular wader, which is the one shown here, which is crab plover, which occurs almost nowhere else in India. It's part of the Marine National Park. I'm sure it must be fascinating to actually look for more marine wildlife here, but there's always too many birds to concentrate on. Don't have time for things like that. There's some of the marine life though. There's a pufferfish. Really strange fish they are. They suck water or air, and probably in this case because it's into their stomach, and they can get 3 to 4 times their actual size. I saw an osprey flying across with a pufferfish some time ago, and it had puffed up to like a complete sphere as it was being carried off by the osprey. But I assume ospreys aren't susceptible to the poison in pufferfish. But we're here to look at birds. A lot of birds, a lot of waders. Those of us from Europe are quite used to looking at waders and looking at big flocks with our scope and just scanning through, trying to find all the different species that are here. And there's a lot of variety. So you'll often see flocks like this, mixed flocks, a few different species. These are actually mostly great knot there at the back, which is not one that we would see in Europe, but then a scattering of other waders as well. I think we have some dunlin here. We have a ruddy turnstone on the right. There's a couple of out of focus Terex sandpipers, but it just has a fantastic variety of waders here. So here's a close-up of one of the great knots. This bird is quite interesting. You'll notice the tags on this one. So there are various studies done with waders where rather than just simply ringing, which you'll see it's got a little metal ring on its left leg, but ringing means the bird needs to be recaptured to read the number on the ring and find out where it came from. The tags are designed so that birdwatchers can actually see them if you get a close enough view. And you can see that on here, we've got on the right leg, we have an orange tag above the knee and the green tag above that. And we can report that and find out where it was actually ringed originally and when. So this particular bird was actually, this was not quite from Gujarat, this was from near Mumbai in November a few years ago. It had actually been ringed just 2 months before that in northeast China, right on the border with North Korea. And that's a distance of 5,500 kilometers that it will have probably done in just one flight. So quite amazing stuff. You can find out from some of these studies that are done now. Tibetan sand plover, very common on the coast, wintering in India. It's what was referred to as lesser sand plover years ago, and has now been split. So you have Tibetan sand plover, which does breed in Ladakh, and we have Siberian sand plover, which probably occurs in India, but no one's really seen them properly. They're very difficult to tell apart, especially in the winter, but we clearly have lots of Tibetan sand plovers very commonly here. Great place also for this lovely plover, which is the Pacific golden plover. It's one that's severely declining. Globally it is, but in India, some of the work that was done based on eBird data majorly, and for State of India's birds, reckon that this has an 80% decline in India in recent years. The reasons for that may well be reasons from outside India. It's a long distance migrant, so wetlands, estuaries and things being reclaimed in China, those sorts of things will cause a problem for waders wintering elsewhere. So global conservation is becoming much more understood as how important it is. We can conserve them in India on their wintering grounds, but if they lose the passage migration sites and the staging sites, we lose a lot of population. So unfortunately, strong decline on that one. Two commoner ones, Eurasian curlew and Eurasian whimbrel. These are very familiar to me, being in Europe and some of our other foreign birders here. Not quite so familiar to most Indian birders, mainly because we all live inland, I think, probably. But this is a nice picture showing the difference in them, because they're similar species. The size is slightly different, but if you don't see them together, that's not easy to tell. But the bill is clearly longer on the curlew here, and the whimbrel shows this nice strong head pattern, brown eye stripe, brown the crown stripe side of the crown, and then a nice prominent whitish supercilium. Another one familiar to me in England, although this in one picture is more oyster catchers than I've ever seen in India. It's quite a scarce wintering bird in India on the coasts, mostly again in Gujarat and particularly Jamnagar area. And here's the speciality, crab plover. It's an unusual bird. It's unique in that it's the only one in its family. It's monospecific, so there is only one crab plover. It's not really a plover either. It's probably more related to coursers. I'm not quite sure. It's also unique in that it's the only shorebird that digs a nest burrow. They nest mostly on the Arabian Peninsula, wintering in East Africa and Kutch particularly. And I mean, I've seen a few on my trips before, but in Jamnagar, if you're there at the right time, you can see many hundreds. And it is really the only place in India where you're going to see those numbers of crab plover. Lots of gulls here. This is Hoogland's gull, which is actually a subspecies these days of lesser blackback gull. Very complicated bunch of the large gulls for taxonomy. Hoogland's gull and steppe gull are the two most commonly seen around here, which are now both considered subspecies of lesser blackback gull, but do look a bit different. So it's well worth paying close attention to the gulls. And they've got lots of other smaller gulls as well, brown-headed, black-headed, slender-billed. And Indian skimmer. Not always here. It doesn't breed here, but after breeding, they breed on inland rivers in other parts of India. The Chambal is famously one of the key places for them, but they wander a bit after breeding, and it's regularly seen at Jamnagar after breeding through the autumn and through the winter. So then, moving on from Jamnagar back into the inland and the dry areas, we pass through Bhuj. Bhuj is a famous desert city, got a rich history, great centre of crafts. So there's lots of the village crafts. You've got lots of the textiles, leather work, and some great shopping opportunities for anyone who needs some souvenirs to bring home, authentic souvenirs. Unfortunately, I suppose, Bhuj is most famous for the earthquake that happened in 2001. A massive earthquake. The epicenter was actually on Bhuj, and 20,000 people died in that. And you'll see signs of recovery around that, or signs of what happened all over wherever you go in the area. This is a house that has been rebuilt and is part of the rebuilding program after the earthquake. And there's some of the embroidery around and the colour you see everywhere. Speaking of colourful, food and colour here, Kuchi de Bailey. This is a street food, really, and it's quite spicy potato mix is the main thing, spicy and sweet, with these sev noodles, hard noodles, pomegranate, peanuts, really nice street food snack. So Bhuj is really the centre for heading into the Greater Rann of Kutch. So the Rann of Kutch itself is a big salt marsh. It's part of the Thar Desert, which is more familiar in Rajasthan. And we have the Great Rann of Kutch in the west, where we are now, and the Little Rann of Kutch further east, both of which have some real key species that are not found other places very easily. Grey hypercoleus especially, but sociable lapwing, red-tailed wheatear is one of them. Pallid squipsal, hubara. So really impressive place. That is the festival that occurs in the winter every year for about 3 months, I think it is. This is the Rann Utsav in the Great Rann of Kutch. It's a festival of music, culture generally, in what's known as the White Rann because of the colour of the salt. There is the Great Rann of Kutch, the White Rann. And one of the really interesting sites is a little bit off the beaten track is Dholavira. I mentioned it very briefly at the start. This is one of the Harappan sites, an archaeological site. This is dating back 5,000 years. It was only discovered in the 1960s. And it's a large area. It's partially excavated, lots is not excavated, and hardly anyone visits. You can just wander around amongst the ruins, and it's a really fascinating place. It also has some good birds as well if you're wandering around. It's like red-tailed wheatear, quite common here. And you pass through one of the biggest flamingo areas there is in Gujarat to get there. It was considered possibly one of the grandest cities of its time. On the map that I showed at the start, I showed a nice little route going from the Great Rann of Kutch through past Dholavira to Little Rann of Kutch. I think don't be fooled by what Google Maps tells you. If you try to do that route by car, I expect you'll be driving across a lot of salt and the crust will break in some place and you'll be down into the mud and the brine and stuff below it and never get out. So it's actually quite a long way around to go and visit Dholavira. But it's just a fascinating place, this in Kutch. Some of the geological features are amazing. It's all formed by weathering and erosion and these perennial streams that, through the earth. Birding wise, though, we often come back to the grasslands. This is Bunny grassland, famous grassland in the Greater Rann of Kutch, along the edge of the Rann, and a lot of diversity here. So you can take a jeep out and scan across for anything. A lot of the birds tend to be not necessarily on the bare, salty areas, but in the vegetation behind, you see these slightly raised areas known as beds where there's vegetation there. And that's often the best place for some of the birds. And the mammals, Indian desert gird, which we find in little burrows here. It's not a gerbil. It's got like short ears and small feet, which is gerbils have. but otherwise it's a bit similar. Tend to see the rear end of them a lot of the time as they dash back down their burrows. And if you're really lucky, desert cat. I think it's also known as Asian wildcat. It's one of the most endangered cats in the world, actually, through habitat loss, hunting, and these days interbreeding with feral cats. You can see it's quite similar to some of the feral cats you see around in India. And as they come into contact with human habitation, that is a major issue in parts of India. Slightly bigger, not a lot though, is the Indian fox. This is, you'll notice the black tip to the tail on the Indian fox. And we also have the desert fox, some cubs here. If you see an adult, it actually has the white tip to the tail. Although, interestingly enough, desert fox is actually a subspecies of what we know in Europe as red fox, which has a black tip to the tail. So somewhat confusing, but this is the same species that I have just outside my house where I live here at the moment. To see them quite often in the evenings. Raptors are especially good in both the rounds. So this is lager falcon. Used to be quite widespread in India. Again, now much more restricted, but still quite common in parts of Rajasthan and Gujarat. Big, powerful falcon, similar to a peregrine in that respect. And then one of my favorites is the imperial eagle, eastern imperial eagle, so a winter visitor. And this is an adult with really blackish plumage and a lovely sort of yellowish head. Great for shrikes here. This is an Isabelline shrike. It's quite common as a winter in the northwest of India, but doesn't extend all across India. So most of us in India are more familiar with the brown shrike you get in the south and the east, which is quite common. But Isabelline shrike replaces it effectively in the north and west in the winter. It's a good area for shrikes generally. So if you come at passage time, so through the autumn, now onwards really, July, August, September especially, it's good for red-backed shrike and red-tailed shrike, which are some of the birds that Indians don't really get to see very much because they breed in Central Asia, they winter in the Middle East and Africa more, so they pass through and they just sort of clip the northwest of India as they pass through on autumn migration. But the special bird here is grey hypercoleus. Like the crown plover, it's unique in that it's the only one in its family, monospecific. So it may as well be called hypercoleus, really, because there aren't any others. Breeds mostly in Iraq and winters in Arabia and northwest India. But there really is only one regular Indian wintering site. The numbers vary from winter to winter. Last time I went, there was just one that I saw because it can be difficult to find some winters. But this is the real special bird of the Great Ran of Kutch. Sociable lapwing, another critically endangered bird through hunting, particularly in Central Asia where it breeds. It's been studied quite a lot in recent years, and they've actually managed to find many more birds than they thought existed, which is great. It's an important area for them wintering and passage in Gujarat and Rajasthan. But they did find, for example, in eastern Turkey, a flock of about 3,000 a few years ago. So there are more than were thought, but it is officially critically endangered. There's the chestnut-bellied sandgrouse that I mentioned, which is the common sandgrouse in the rocky and desert areas. And most definitely not a common sandgrouse is the spotted sandgrouse, which we can find here in the Greater Ran of Kutch. Again, some winters sandgrouse tend to be quite erratic. So some winters there's more than others. There might be none in some winters. But with a lot of luck, you might find some spotted sandgrouse somewhere. Not a bird I've seen in India. And Sykes's nightjar is a speciality in desert areas. Quite a pale, sort of greyish nightjar. This one's quite obvious, but amongst the rocks, these are very difficult to find. They're so well camouflaged. And in the daytime, they just sit beside the rocks and do nothing, come out at dusk only. Amongst smaller birds, this is white-naped tit. Although I've got the wrong angle here for you to see any of the nape at all. A bit similar to a grey tit, a cinereous tit. but it's entirely black and white, and it's really restricted to acacia forest, almost exclusively in Rajasthan and Gujarat, and then a small, very isolated population in southern India. But this is the place to come and see them if you get away from the main run and you go out into some of the thorn scrub forest around. You can catch up with white-naped tit. A couple of other specialities there as well, like Marshall's Iora would be one of them. Sometimes white-bellied minivet. Love these acacia forests. And there's the hedgehog, Indian hedgehog, also known as pale hedgehog, for obvious reasons. The desert hedgehog, which you might be lucky about if one night coming back from an evening safari, you could come across Indian hedgehog. Then it's time to head east, and the final site on today's journey is the Little Run of Kutch. So again, part of the Run of Kutch, it's a saline desert, similarly to the Great Run. It floods every monsoon, so you have some big wetlands here as well. It's not all desert. And it's known as the Indian Wild Ass Sanctuary, and it is conserved specifically for. Indian wild ass are quite common in herds in parts of it. A few other good mammals though, nilgai again, there's hyenas here, both of the foxes are here, and some of the similar birds to what we find in the Great Run. So again, you can take your Jeep out across the rather barren land here, scan around, maybe a hoopoe lark somewhere, but often actually it's those bits, the raised grassy areas that are better for some of the wildlife. Little Run is super for raptors. So peregrines here, they will sit out on the open sometimes, just looking for anything. They've obviously got a fantastic eyesight. They can see a long way from here. So you'll scan around and often look for lumps in the distance, just down on the ground, and work out, is that a bird or not? Go a bit closer, and quite often there will be a peregrine. You get two subspecies of peregrines in India. The resident Shaheen, which you find in the rocky areas nesting on cliffs. And in the winter, you get this one, which is the Calidus. It's bigger, heavier bird. It's mostly from northern Russia. And the other nice resident falcon you get is red-necked falcon. A little bit smaller, sort of medium-sized falcon. Unfortunately, declining and getting quite restricted in range. It does occur over lots of peninsular India, but it's really difficult to find. They just don't seem to be a very predictable bird. You see it in one place and then just not see it there again. Again, Gujarat and Rajasthan, probably the best places in India to see red-necked falcon. And certainly to see this rare winter visitor, which is the merlin, the smallest falcon there is. This is a female. Males are a bit smaller still. A rare falcon where Little Run of Kutch, I would imagine, is probably the most reliable place in India to see them. Short-eared owls is another good site for short-eared owls. Quite interesting in that short-eared owls, some years there are several in India, some years there are none at all. And that's typical of elsewhere where they winter as well. They breed in the sort of tundra areas across northern Europe and Russia. Also, even in Britain, we get them breeding on our upland areas. But particularly in those northern areas, their population and their migration is very tied to lemmings. So in a lemming year, where there's lots of food, they don't necessarily need to go so far. In poor lemming years, they need to struggle and they need to go search further for food. So they are recorded even right down to the southern tip of India. So they've been seen at Kanyakumari. Quite a few quails you can get in Gujarat, bush quails as well as the true quails. This is a rain quail with a thick black you see on the throat and the breast. All the quails are quite tricky to see. Monsoon is the time for them, really, and rain quails are calling a lot. In the late autumn and the winter, you can often flush the quails, but not get good views, and the females in particular are very difficult to tell apart. So common quail is probably commoner than rain quail, I think, but I don't know how we'd ever really know. Not very easy. And one special bird we have here is the Asian houbara, wintering bustard, which is, again, declining a lot because of hunting. Little Run of Kutch, probably best place to see them. Desert National Park as well, gets them in Rajasthan, Great Rann of Kutch a bit. But bustards are really suffering generally. I haven't talked about it on this talk actually, but in Gujarat, Great Indian bustard, I think, has now ceased to breed at all. There is a bustard sanctuary in Gujarat, but I don't think it has any bustards anymore, unfortunately. I know for a long time there was one male, it was the last one in the population. So the Great Indian bustard is almost only restricted now to Desert National Park in Rajasthan. Lesser florican, the smaller bustard, is still present in Gujarat. Falavadar would be the best place to see that in the monsoon times, where they do this jump out of the grass as their display. But they're very difficult to see at other times, very secretive. And their population is declining drastically, so they're critically endangered. And in fact, wider in India, then you also have the Bengal florican in the northeast, which also is extremely endangered. So those three in particular, the two floricans and the Great Indian bustard, are all at severe risk through habitat loss especially, and don't really have a particularly rosy future, unfortunately. Passage migrant, autumn passage migrant, is the rufous-tailed scrub robin. Really attractive bird, find on the ground quite often, lifting its tail up, see this lovely orangey colour. So Gujarat is really good for passage migrants. I mentioned earlier about the shrikes that pass through, but for Indian birders visiting Gujarat or Western Rajasthan in, say, August, September is a must, because there's several species you just don't see elsewhere in India. Things like common whitethroat, European roller, what else do we have? Spotted flycatcher, another one. So a few good species that you don't see elsewhere in India. One you do see in quite a few places, Indian bushlark, very much a dry country lark. So Gujarat has a good population. And the one I mentioned earlier is the hoopoe lark, greater hoopoe lark. Really stunning looking bird, quite a unique bird, and that loves these really open sand salt flats areas, just restricted to very northwest India. Wheatears are some of the commoner birds in the drier areas, some of the commoner small birds. So this is a desert wheatear, which has that wholly black tail. You also have variable wheatear, which is quite a common one, and Isabeline wheatear, which is another common one. And Asian desert warbler, really nice small warbler, will be in these very low bushes. And intriguingly, they tend to follow wheatears around a lot. So wheatears are feeding on the ground. Very often desert warblers will follow a little bit behind them. You find the two species closely associated with each other. It's thought that's probably for food, that I know the desert warblers are taking food that the wheatears are finding or disturbing, but it could also be as a predator warning. So the desert warbler gets a benefit from the wheatear spotting predators or attracting predators first, potentially. Common starling, very common in Europe, very common in America, not so common in India. It's a winter visitor to the northwest, and they're really smart birds. You look at the intricate patterning on this. These starlings are slightly different from the ones that we're used to in Europe. These are coming from Central Asia, so Kazakhstan and places like that where they breed. And a really nice purple and green iridescence. And another Central Asian visitor comes here in the winter is the pallid scops owl. Really well camouflaged, difficult to see against the tree trunks. In fact, most of them tend to be found in the grounds of the lodges. So Little Rann of Kutch is particularly good. You search around the trees in the lodge and you can sometimes find a roosting one in the daytime. They're quite scarce, but actually it's mostly probably because they're just very, very difficult to find. And they're probably found in the lodges a little bit more because that's where people are looking for them. Not an easy bird to find, but then if you can see them, you can sometimes get quite close to them. And I mentioned these areas flood, so the Little Rann of Kutch has a massive wetlands just after the monsoon and through the early part of winter. So it's one of the best places for the lesser flamingo. And I mentioned earlier, but lesser flamingo, if it breeds in India, it is only ever in Kutch. And it's very sensitive to water levels. So you'll find flamingo colonies washed out sometimes if the water level is too high. but you can see enormous flocks, tens of thousands. Along with the great white pelicans that we showed earlier, I just thought this was quite a fascinating photograph because I know this flamingo is lesser or not greater, but they look tiny against the pelicans. They're quite big birds, but you just realize how big and heavy a great white pelican is. But really, this is the Indian wild ass sanctuary after all. So this is what lots of people come to see, the Asiatic wild ass. Beautiful looking horse. It's called the Kur, as opposed to the Kiang, which you get in Ladakh, the Tibetan plain, which otherwise is quite similar. So they are threatened. They are really only here in the Little Run of Kutch. Numbers are doing well, I think, in recent years. There's a low thousands, 4,000 or 5,000, maybe a bit more than that now. And they have started to expand out a little bit. So you can find them a bit in the Greater Run of Kutch and parts of Rajasthan. But it's really, by far, the majority are here in the Little Run of Kutch. And that, with a few more wild ass, brings us to the end of our little journey around. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to take you through on that virtual tour of the wonders of the birds and wildlife of Gujarat.
So with this very spectacular webinar coming to an end, we now move to the question and answer session. Prior to that, participants can see a few links in the chat box. And if today's webinar interested you, then the first link is your gateway to experiencing the bird life, wildlife, and landscape of Gujarat firsthand. The second link is of the Global Wildlife Fair Instagram handle, where you can follow us to stay updated with more such webinars. And finally, last is the Instagram handle of the Indian Wildlife Network, where you can join and listen to more such experts in the field of wildlife tourism. So with this, we start off with the question and answer session.
Kirtika, let Mike talk about the tour that he's going to do in November first, and then we take question and answers.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Mohit. Yeah, I don't get much of a chance to visit India these days because I do work in the UK, but I try when I get my holidays to visit once or twice a year. So I'm looking forward to coming in November, where I'm going to do a tour very similar to the route I've just taken you through there, actually. So we'll be going down to Velavadar, to Gir, to Jamnagar, both Great Run and Little Run of Kutch, for 2 weeks in November. And then at the end of that, I'm going to go on into Rajasthan and go to the Desert National Park. So a few key birds to look for, but part of that is really just to enjoy the spectacles of bird watching. I think we all love to see rare birds, and there's obviously a few special birds that I've talked about here. But I think one of the things that's so fantastic is the landscapes and the large numbers of birds. You can't beat seeing hundreds of thousands of flamingos, potentially big flocks of cranes, larks, wheatears everywhere. It's the whole experience is great. So yeah, so I'll be around in November, and I'm sure if a few people wanted to come and join, they can do.
Wonderful.
Right.
Wonderful, Mike. It was absolutely a fantastic presentation. I think the knowledge that people gain from one would know about snippets that add value to people, like, for example, pattern calls, or letting people know that it's the largest flying bird, or about black bucks or hyenas or things like that. So it's knowledge of the entire natural history aspect of it. Now.
Yeah, I agree, Boyd. I'm just browsing the chat because I wasn't looking before, and it's really great to see some local knowledge chipping in where I'm not up to date, or I don't know my facts because I've not been to Gujarat for a while. But it's fantastic to get a little bit more local knowledge. Things like Saras cranes, not as many as there used to be. Yeah, unfortunately, that's true across India. good to see you comment about harriers. So I'm really looking forward to the harrier roost. It's just I love seeing large numbers of raptors. You all know how much I enjoyed my Amur falcon trips in previous years. I'm coming in November, so I'm skipping Amur falcons this year and doing Gujarat instead. But large number of raptors, you can't beat it. Um, but yeah, so really thank you for the little snippets people have added in the chat there. I also
So
think that's one of the
friends,
benefits
yeah,
we have, is that so many people now taking a real interest in wildlife and birds, especially in India, but also doing things like using eBird and spreading the information, the awareness. So we know a lot more about some of these birds now. If you take the vulture example of the decline in vultures, they declined by like 97% or whatever before anyone really noticed.
yeah,
And by
yeah,
then it's too late to really save the populations properly. What's happening now is people are recording, people are going out to their local areas, they're going to visit new areas, they're writing down what they're seeing, they're submitting it on eBird. We have brilliant information on birds, especially in India, that is in many ways is better than a lot of the countries in the West where you should have more bird watchers recording. So it's brilliant to see. Thank you.
yeah. That's exactly why we started Indian Wildlife Network, Mike. 3 months ago, we started this network, and we already have more than, 12,000 members of this wildlife community, people who love wildlife and they want to do something about it. And a whole lot of them are bird watchers. A whole lot of them are interested in mangroves or habitats or ecology. And now what we're doing is setting up these meetups in different parts of the country so that people can network with each other, meet each other, collaborate to gain knowledge, to disseminate knowledge, to bring about opportunities. So Indian Wildlife Network is the platform where people are going to meet more often to discuss what they can do locally. And that is what makes a difference. If there's a wetland or a village pond or something that's important, then a community can get together to save it, to do something about it, or a habitat can be saved. I think a lot of potential lies there. And then also the youngsters, who want to be on fast track with AI and technology and everything, can start putting it to good use. So it's fantastic. If you have any questions, friends, please type them. We're not going to let people speak because then, it can be very long drawn. And if you have questions to ask, do pen them down, and then Mike will read them out and then answer to you. So we'll wind up in another 9 minutes. Is that okay, Mike?
It's fine with
Yeah,
me, yeah. But
yeah.
lunchtime for me, that'll be.
Okay. So, and it's beer time for us.
Ah, okay, yes, I have a little bit long to go, but anyway,
Right.
I'm just scanning down through the
So,
chat
friends,
and
if you've got questions for Mike, put them in the message box inbox, and we'll read them out.
yeah, there's just so many great places to go. I think in Gujarat, it's like I it was when I was living in India, I explored quite a lot. Unfortunately, I'm a bit restricted on time now, but I think coming for 2 weeks, it's quite difficult to know. I'd like to try some new places as well, but then you want to go to the same places again because they're so good.
Yeah,
And I'd
yeah,
like to look at more things than just birds as well. Obviously, there's a few really interesting mammals here, but the Marine National Park in Jamnagar, what a
yeah,
fantastic site that is to
exactly.
look at marine wildlife.
Yeah. So, I think it's Jimmy from Elder Tours Dubai. I'm not sure if it's Jimmy, but his name is Elder Tours. Where can we get the full trip details of Mike in November? Um, Mike, can you post the link
I
if
can
you
post
have
a
it
link.
handy?
I can indeed. Yes, I'll do that. So just put a link to that, which is um, under Bubo Birding, which is a sort of fun website I have to promote some tours, which is always a pleasure working with Mohit and his colleagues at Asian Adventures.
Thank you.
Lots of female Montagu's Harriers. I see the comment coming in. I think that's Hasib. It's quite interesting. I think if you come in November, yes, I think you would typically find, say, something like for every one male, you'll see about 10 females. But intriguingly, it won't be females. Actually, most of those are probably juveniles, because juveniles and females look quite similar, and they're quite difficult to tell, especially as it's getting dusk and you can't see the birds so clearly at that time. And obviously in the autumn, you'll have many more young birds around. There's been birds that have hatched this year. So you typically see probably for every one male, you've probably got similar numbers of females, I guess, but more numbers of juveniles. Although intriguingly, I know might be the same Montagues and Pallid Harriers, but in Europe, for example, we get a few more hen harriers, and males and females don't winter in the same areas so much. So I think females tend to go a bit further south typically. So you tend to see more females or young ones a bit further south than you do males. So there might be an aspect of that in Gujarat as well, that maybe males aren't wintering so far south. Why we see more females and juveniles? Who knows? There's a lot still to discover.
Yes, absolutely. And there's a question for me. Yeah, because it was incessant rain, Jimmy, and we're going to and we'll definitely call you. A lot of these meetups are getting hundreds of people to get together and to network with each other. So the next one we'll keep you informed and we'll let you know when it's happening. Hasib is saying, and somehow now more and more kestrels in LRK.
That's interesting, yeah. That would suggest that there's a lot of small mammals around. So maybe the jerds that I was showing, or the gerbils and things like that, because kestrels tend to take more small mammals than birds. So presumably they're getting good food.
Okay, Mike, I think people are done with these questions and they don't have any more to ask. So we could we could wind up now and then meet up again. I need to talk to you tomorrow at some point of time. I'll call you and find time to discuss a few things. But otherwise, all good, and this was a wonderful session. We plan to use this for Gujarat tourism, and we also want to use this to attract more people to come to India. And we also want to use this to repurpose the information for knowledge, for building a knowledge base. And if you've got any Friends, if you've got any questions to ask, please feel free to email Mike. He's given his email ID, mike@bubo.org. Feel free to get in touch.
Quite happy to. I just thought one thing actually I should have said, which was a big thank you to all the photographers who provided their photos in that presentation. It's just incredible, the photo selection we get from people in India now. Compared to when I was first in Delhi, I remember working on the Delhi Bird website and working with Bill Harvey and Bikram Grewal a little bit on some pictures they were finding for their book, and how difficult it was to find photos then. I think we just have such a rich selection of bird and wildlife photographs now in India. It's brilliant. So thank you to all those photographers. Thank you for Celil, in particular at Asian Adventures, for helping put some of those slides together. And apologies to those pictures that you saw, which were not very good there. They were probably mine.
No, they're pretty good. Yeah, they did the job. So, Kritika, do you want to end the session by saying whatever you have to say?
Yes, sir. So with this, we come to an end of today's session. Firstly, thank you so much, sir, for taking out your valuable time and taking us on this spectacular journey of Gujarat. Secondly, I would like to thank the participants for taking out their time and joining us today. Do not forget to follow our Instagram page for more such webinars, and we definitely will see you in the next one. Good evening, everyone. With this, we sign off.
Thank you. Bye-bye.